Morning, Trainiacs. That is the end of a high-intensity Team Trainiac Zwift ride. We've been doing them every week. They're open to everyone around the world. Not just on Team Trainiac, but anyone who wants to look like this at the end of a bike. Yes. Oh. So, we all know that we've got to train hard, that it can't all just be zone 2, nothing but easy. While that's an important part, training hard is the stuff that actually makes us faster, better, stronger. But at what point does too much hard become too much? When do those diminishing returns come in? That is what we're going to talk about today, because there's actually a study that shows an exact amount of minutes that you have to start worrying about diminishing returns. And apparently, sloppy thinking. Good pops. I, as you can see, am feeling kind of summery. Summer came for a couple of days here in Winnipeg. That's nice. Might be a shade of dark pink soon. All right, so let's get right into this. What we support on teamtrainiac.com, what I support, what I find works well and what studies show work well is a really high volume, like the vast majority of your training should actually be at quite low intensity, very, very relaxed, going out for like just a conversational ride or run with your pals. Really easy, building that base of fitness, building the mitochondrial density with low intensity training. Then sprinkle in, itchy? Then sprinkle in a little bit of high intensity work, that real sharp effort, the HIT efforts, the high intensity interval training efforts, the VO2 max building efforts. These are the efforts that make you better, stronger, and faster. The low intensity stuff really just gives you a foundation to be able to execute those really well. But then the questions come up along the lines of, well, if some high intensity is good, why would more not be good? Or if 80-20, where 80% is the low intensity work and only 20% of your training is the high intensity work, why, if high intensity is what makes us better, faster, stronger, why isn't that more like 70-30 or 60-40? And what in the world happened to that adage in the 80s and 90s of no pain, no gain? And all you had to do was just log huge amounts of training volumes. And you saw swimmers that were, as 12-year-old kids, doing 75,000 yards a week, and runners, like just amateur runners, logging 100-mile weeks. Where did all that go? I'll tell you where. People ask me what I wish I knew about training 5 years ago, and the answer is really very simple. In 2017, I went into that season thinking that more pain, more gain was going to end up being the way to do it. I was ready to commit to triathlon and see what I was capable of, and I was ready to bleed to do it. So month after month, I trained hard. Every single workout seemed really hard. Rest week and the on weeks really didn't have that much difference. And after the course of 13 months of this, I was so sick that I could only train about 10 days in a row before I actually got sick and then had to take a week or two off. I ended up having depressive states where I was at the start of doing this, but I was lying in bed Friday night crying, worrying that I would never be able to do triathlon again because I was so sick and injured. And I'd love to say that I've got this all figured out, but that year was such a huge detriment to me physically that in the middle of that year, my hormones tested low. And since that time, here we are 3 years later, I still battle low hormones and issues of weight gain, as I'm sure you all have seen over the past 14 months. Cortisol levels are in the tank, and we're actually working with a doctor that has told me that he has some 84-year-old patients that have better looking hormones than me. That 2017 season is such a huge chink in the armor of me as an athlete that it isn't just this short lesson of like, all right, well, I won't do that another season. It is something that stays with me for a long period of time, and I don't want that to happen to you. In a study that was published in the International Journal of Sports Physiology and Performance, researchers studied 35 subjects, and these subjects were fit adults. You and I, they trained on average for 8 hours per week. And what they ended up doing was over the course of 3 weeks, they tested athletes at the start of the 3 weeks. Throughout the 3 weeks, they monitored their heart rate levels, and at the end of the 3 weeks, they looked at the outcomes depending on the different types of training that each of them did. And what they found was the athletes who in the 3 weeks prior had spent 40 minutes or more at 90% at or above their maximum heart rate, they saw an increased level of cortisol that didn't come down after the workout as much as the athletes who had spent less than 40 minutes on average per week at that heart rate level. Now, what does this mean? How does that translate to what you need to do and what I went through? Well, I want to show you something. This here is a really basic chart of what happens during the stages of overtraining, essentially, what the progress is. And what you can see is that cortisol raises. Cortisol is like our fight or flight hormone, that when we start going into periods of adaptation, it's normal for our cortisol levels to go high. But if that raised cortisol continues for a long period of time, essentially we burn our body's ability to produce cortisol out, and then it ends up crashing. And what happens at this point is cortisol is burnt out, and what we see in my tests is that cortisol is very, very low. Well, to make up for that, to continue going, our body starts pumping out adrenaline. But adrenaline is like your backup battery. Eventually, adrenaline can't even keep up, and that's when you start getting into overtraining. And what we've got here is I've overlaid another chart that actually basically matches the feeling. So think about this, the adrenal fatigue stage is here where the function of the adrenals, the function of the hormones is gradually deteriorating as time goes on. In both of these, the time is not to scale and it differs for each athlete, but this is kind of how it feels. You feel a little bit beat up and then you come back, and then a little bit beat up and then you come back, and a little bit beat up, but eventually you reach this point where cortisol starts to tank and eventually you just can't keep up. And this is essentially where I'm at here right now, still from what happened in 2017. It went down here all the way back in 2017 and hasn't really recovered because I'm still Triathlon Taren. Fortunately, this lockdown is... Can you lie down? Fortunately, this lockdown and the lack of racing right now couldn't come at a better time because now I get to spend the next 7 months essentially just worrying about my health. Now, what do you do? Well, a very simple 3-step system to make sure that this isn't something that you encounter. First, you load up on a huge amount of low intensity training. On teamtrainiac.com, during the off season, we monitor and we give workouts that are like 100% low intensity training so that during the race season, we can absorb a little bit more and we don't have to worry about tipping over that ratio of the 80-20. It gives us that really nice foundation to go into a race season and do the more intense work. But when that intense work comes in race season, we gradually increase it, starting in, say, January or February with a few minutes a week, and then a few more, and then a few more, and it allows the athletes to then see at what point does their body tip over into not feeling good. What is not feeling good? That's step 2, which is monitoring. This 40 minutes per week is really just an average, but you have to look at things like, are your muscles more sore than you think they should be? Are they staying sore for a while? Is your sleep somewhat disturbed? That means, are you sleeping too much or are you sleeping too little? In either case, that's an indication that you are getting a little bit overtrained. Are you lacking motivation? Are you supposed to do 2 workouts in a day and you just can't get off the couch for that second one? That is your brain telling you, hey, maybe it's time to rest. These are all the cues that it's time to back off. And when we get those cues, it's important that you listen to them. And the third step that you take is looking retroactively in your Training Peaks account or your Garmin account or Elevate for Strava or whatever it is that you use for training, and just see time in zones. How much time are you spending in that zone 5 that is at 90% of your maximum heart rate or more? And the biggest thing that I can suggest about all that is back off and rest more before this becomes an issue. You don't want to be a guy who makes his living on social media as the fit guy and has gained 13, 15 pounds, even though I did do PRs last year. PRs or not though, health is very important, and these are things that I wish I knew 5 years ago that I want to impart to you now. I am going to do another video about everything that I've found that we're going through right now. I've got to wait for some testing to come back and get a protocol from some doctors so you can just see what it is that I'm going through. What are the physiological symptoms that we're going through, and what are the tests that you should keep an eye on and maybe consider for yourself so that you can stop things before it's too late. Because when it comes right down to it, performance comes with good health. You got to have good health to have good performance long term. And I might have burned the candle a little bit too hard back in 2017, and it's time to fix that now. It's kind of good timing for the lack of races right now. Anyway, that is it. If you want to make sure that you don't miss that video, hit the subscribe button below. Later, Trainiacs. Bye, Trainiacs. I want to go play outside because it's nice out.